We all grew up understanding how a battlefield surrender works. Soldiers get pinned down, they run out of ammunition or options, and eventually a white flag goes up. Then men from the other side walk over, zip tie the wrists, march the prisoners back behind the lines. Human beings on both ends of the transaction. That's been the script for every war in recorded history. Until now, Ukraine just rewrote it. On April 13th, during what Kyiv celebrates as Arms Makers Day, President Volodymyr Zelensky stepped in front of a camera and claimed something no head of state had ever claimed before. Ukrainian forces had, for the first time since the start of the full-scale war, captured a Russian position using only drones and unmanned ground robotic systems, with Russian troops surrendering without any involvement of Ukrainian infantry. Euromaidan press. Think about what that sentence actually means. No boots, no riflemen, no assault element walking forward with their hearts pounding in their ears. Just machines rolling up to a hole in the ground, and the men inside that hole deciding they'd rather live than die fighting a glorified lawnmower with a rifle bolted to it. Zelensky named the systems involved Ratel, Termit, Ardel, Rice, Zmi, Protector, Volya, and others, and said Ukrainian ground robotics had logged more than 22,000 missions in just 3 months. Euromaidan press. That's not a tech demo. That's not a Pentagon PowerPoint slide. That is an industrial-scale program already shifting the battlefield physics in Eastern Europe in real time. Now let me give you a moment of honesty the mainstream press won't. Ukrainian military analyst Ivan Stupak, a former SBU security service officer, told the Moscow Times that the captured position was likely a small secondary objective rather than a major breakthrough, and that Zelensky's announcement was in large part a public relations move. The Moscow Times fine. That's true, but the PR framing doesn't change the underlying reality. The precedent is set, the paradigm moved, and NATO's analysts, not the politicians, the actual officers who read after-action reports for a living, are quietly losing sleep over it. Put yourself just for a moment in a Russian soldier's boots. Worn-out boots, probably. Foreign Policy reported this week that Russian drone crews have turned a strip as deep as 9 miles behind the Ukrainian line into a kill zone where anything that moves dies. Foreign Policy. Your Telegram feed is blacked out. Starlink is jammed. The officer who was supposed to rotate your unit out never showed. Then you hear the buzzing. Not one drone. Many. FPV munitions scream in and crater the bunker next to yours. Dirt rains down. You grip your rifle because you've been told the Ukrainians are coming to dig you out. But nobody comes. Instead, something crawls over the ridgeline. Tracks. A turret. Wheels that don't belong to any armored vehicle you've been trained to recognize. It rolls closer. Another one follows. Overhead, the drones keep circling. There is no target for you to shoot that matters. A rifle round bounces off the hull. The turret rotates toward you. And at that moment, every soldier faces the same mathematics. Surrender to a machine or be killed by one. Publicly reported precedents go back further than April 13th. In July 2025, Ukraine's 3rd Separate Assault Brigade described surviving Russian soldiers holding up a cardboard sign reading, "We want to surrender," after robots struck their bunker in Kharkiv Oblast. We are the mighty. This didn't happen out of nowhere. Oleg Fedoroshin, R&D director at Ukrainian robotics maker DevDroid, told Business Insider that Russian soldiers have surrendered to his company's machines multiple times and that ground robots work best paired with aerial drones. The aerial platforms surveil and soften. The ground robots push into the isolated positions. Drone XL. That's hunter-killer architecture. And Ukraine has been quietly building it for 18 months. Here's what should make every American citizen sit up straight. According to the Lowy Institute, Ukraine now has 280 companies developing unmanned ground vehicles. A single machine gun-equipped UGV reportedly held a frontline position for about 45 consecutive days, and Brigadier General Andriy Beletsky, commander of Ukraine's 3rd Army Corps, has said that units integrating UGVs could reduce their frontline infantry requirements by up to 30% by the end of 2026, potentially climbing to 80% in the future. The interpreter, 80%. Read that number again. A nation under existential invasion is on track to automate 4 out of every 5 combat support roles within a decade. And the economics are the part where the Pentagon should be very, very uncomfortable. Foreign Policy reported that Ukrainian UGVs average less than $20,000 per unit. Operators control them from Starlink terminals well outside Russian drone range, and roughly 12 brigades, including the 3rd Assault Brigade, the Kartia Brigade, and the 93rd Mechanized, are now actively recruiting robot operators. Foreign Policy A single ZMIY demining platform produced by Ukrainian firm Rovertech costs roughly $20,000, a fraction of comparable American systems, clears 7,000 square meters of ground per day, and can keep pace with advancing infantry. Modern War Institute, $20,000. A soldier on the Ukrainian front earns that in about 8 months. A robot does not eat. A robot does not sleep. A robot does not write letters home, does not go AWOL, does not need a priest, does not have a mother in a village somewhere waiting for news. A robot is a line item on a spreadsheet. Russia, meanwhile, is still running the old playbook. Manpower, meat, wave after wave. Vice President J.D. Vance declared in late March that Iran had no navy and no ability to hit the United States the way it could have weeks earlier. The same tone of triumphalism Moscow has been using about Ukraine for 4 years now, but the battlefield keeps telling a different story. The Daily Caller, Vladimir Putin's entire theory of victory was attritional arithmetic. Outlast, outgrind, outbleed. But attrition only works when your enemy's soldiers are the ones bleeding. When the thing on the receiving end of your artillery shell is a $20,000 tracked vehicle and not a 22-year-old Ukrainian farm boy, the math collapses. The scale is what nobody in Washington has internalized yet. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Digital Transformation, nearly 15,000 UGVs were delivered to the military in 2025 alone, with plans exceeding 20,000 units for 2026, and more than 270 companies now developing them domestically. The new Voice of Ukraine Ukrainian manufacturer Tencor, which produced over 2,000 UGVs in 2025, is forecasting demand of roughly 40,000 units in 2026, with 10 to 15% of those armed, meaning Ukraine alone may field more armed ground robots this year than most Western nations possess across their entire militaries combined. Drone XL. Let that settle in your chest. One country, at war, in its 5th year of fighting for survival, outproducing the combined unmanned ground fleets of NATO's wealthy members. And it isn't just the numbers, it's the tempo. Ukraine's commander-in-chief Oleksandr Syrsky said that robotic systems carried out 50% more missions in March than in February. The Moscow Times. The Ukrainian General Staff has reported that robotic platforms have reduced personnel casualties by up to 30%, while in the 3rd Assault Brigade, UGVs now conduct 80% of logistics operations along the line of contact, climbing to 90% in the heavily contested cities of Pokrovsk and Myrnograd. Modern War Institute, 90%. A brick of ammunition, a crate of water, a wounded man, 9 times out of 10. A machine is doing the carrying and the dying instead of a human being. Now extend that outward. Defense One reports that NATO's Allied Command Transformation is running an extended study on force lethality enhancement, while Brigadier General Chris Gent, NATO Deputy Chief of Staff for Transformation and Integration, is leading an alliance effort to integrate ground robots as part of Multi-Domain Task Force X. Defense One translation: the entire Western military establishment is sitting at a desk right now, rewriting doctrine they haven't touched since the Cold War, because a country they almost wrote off in February 2022 just invented the future of ground warfare and is handing them the syllabus. Let's talk about the second front, the one that runs deep inside Russian territory. While ground robots reshape the line of contact, Ukraine's long-range drones have been ripping the cash out of the Kremlin's wallet. According to Bloomberg, just before the latest Ukrainian attacks, the Baltic Sea ports of Primorsk and Ust-Luga together handled about 45%, roughly 1.72 million barrels per day, of Russia's seaborne crude exports. Energy Connect's Al Jazeera, citing Reuters calculations, reported that at least 40% of Russia's oil export capacity has been halted due to drone attacks, a disputed strike on a major pipeline, and the seizure of tankers. Al Jazeera 40%. Of the thing that keeps Putin's government solvent, gone. Euro-Maiden Press documented that Ukraine struck Primorsk overnight on March 22, 23, igniting a fuel depot and setting fire to terminal berths and 2 tankers, followed by confirmed strikes on Ust-Luga using long-range drones that covered over 900 kilometers, and a subsequent hit on the Kiev-Karishi refinery, one of Russia's largest, processing roughly 350,000 barrels per day. Euro-Maiden Press. The Primorsk satellite images from late March look like a Hollywood special effect. Tank farms bleeding black smoke into the Baltic sky, and a Rosneft internal memo admitting, before these latest strikes even happened, that physical defenses cannot guarantee the safety of the facilities against Ukrainian drones. 900 kilometers. In February, Ukrainian drones reached a Lukoil refinery 1,700 kilometers from Ukrainian lines, marking the longest confirmed drone strike of the war at that time. Euro-Maiden Press sit with that geography for a moment. That is the distance from Washington, D.C. to Dallas, Texas. And Ukrainian-built drones, some of them under the control of AI targeting rather than a remote pilot, are flying that distance, finding their target and burning it to the ground. The question every American policymaker needs to answer is this: if Ukraine can do this on a wartime budget, with half its energy grid bombed and with Western aid flowing in fits and starts, what do you think happens when this technology proliferates? Zelensky's trip to Germany this week to meet with Ukraine's largest military backer was partly about exactly this, and German firm Quantum Systems announced it would unveil 2 new joint ventures with Ukrainian manufacturers during Berlin talks. The Moscow Times Ukrainian drone expertise is now being sold abroad through 10-year defense cooperation agreements signed with Saudi Arabia and Qatar in March 2026. We are the mighty. The genie isn't going back in the bottle. It was never in the bottle. Now fairness demands I flag the limits, because I'm not here to sell you a fantasy. John Hardy of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies told reporters in February that autonomous navigation for ground vehicles remains especially difficult to make reliable, and that while Ukraine is experimenting with visual and terrain matching systems as GPS alternatives, full autonomy is not there yet. Defense 1 Ukrainian officer cited by the Lowy Institute said robots fail to reach their destinations 4 times out of 5 under certain conditions due to Russian drone threats and rough terrain with communications, even with Starlink integration remaining a major vulnerability. The interpreter 4 out of 5, that's not a finished product, that's a weapons system being bolted together on the fly, with soldiers rewriting firmware in dugouts under artillery fire. But here's the thing: Ukraine is iterating at a speed Russia simply cannot match. Russia carries out robotic operations in large volumes too, but they are largely limited to one-way attack drones like Shahed variants and occasional wounded evacuation, not position seizure. Defense 1. That is the gap. That is the inflection point. One side is using machines to take ground. The other is using machines to hit static targets, and the moral ledger gets uglier. Commentators have pointed out the uncomfortable corollary. If a nation can seize territory without risking its own troops, the political calculus of war transforms overnight. Boots on the ground no longer carries the political cost of sending young men home in flag-draped coffins, and the temptation for robot-only ground invasions could become enormous. Planet Today. That is a sentence every American voter should tattoo on the back of their hand, because the country that figures out how to invade another country without having to explain the casualties to the evening news is the country that will be tempted to invade first. Back to the immediate fight. What Ukraine demonstrated on April 13th was not a gimmick. It was a proof of concept for what analysts are now calling, and I think history will validate the term, the drone wall doctrine. Aerial systems find, fix, and suppress. Ground robots breach and seize. Human soldiers arrive only to consolidate and hold. The kill zone expands. The casualty rate drops. The industrial base churns out 20,000 more machines next year. Russia bet on manpower. Russia bet on attrition. Russia bet that Western resolve would crack before the Russian taxpayer did. 3 bets. 3 losing hands, and the dealer just revealed a 4th card nobody expected, a robot holding a Kalashnikov rolling up to a Russian bunker and waiting for the white flag. The men inside that bunker were smarter than their president. They surrendered. The question for the rest of us sitting in comfortable American living rooms is whether our own defense establishment is paying close enough attention, because whatever the next war looks like, whether it's in the Taiwan Strait, the Arctic, the Baltic, or someplace nobody has mapped yet, it is going to look a lot more like the footage coming out of Donetsk tonight than like anything taught at West Point 15 years ago. The future showed up, it arrived on tracks, and it didn't ask permission.